Start. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're on in the world when you're joining. My name's Rich Good. I'm a managing director here at EY, and with my colleague, Kyle Bolden. Kyle, you want to say hello, introduce yourself?
Hey, sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Kyle Bolden. I am an assurance partner at EY. I am also taking on the additional responsibility of the market segment leader role beginning in January. So transitioning into that for real estate, hospitality, and construction. Good to be with everyone.
Thanks, Kyle. Let's jump right in here. I think we only have you for about a half an hour, and we've got a lot of good stuff we want to talk about. So the title of our talk today is called The Rise of S in ESG, Environment, Social, and Governance. And just a little bit about how we came up with that topic. I think particularly in the corporate real estate world, when we think of sustainability, we think of ESG. We think of waste, water, greenhouse gas emissions, chillers, HVAC. We think of GRESB and all the detailed information they want. We don't necessarily think as much about the S and the G, the social and the governance issues. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the S issues, what they are, why they're so important, and what some companies are trying to do about it. So this is just our disclaimer, of course. This is our opinion, not necessarily those of EY. But I want to really jump in and talk about ESG. So let's define ESG. ESG is often used interchangeably with sustainability or corporate responsibility. And I'm not sure that's really accurate anymore. ESG just seems to be much bigger than pure sustainability. Sustainability to me is you sort of see the chart, the timeline down below where we start off with corporate philanthropy, then social responsibility. Then we kind of got into sustainability. That was about, changing our light bulbs and reducing our energy usage, measuring and pledging to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, coming up with renewable energy strategies, all good stuff. But it's morphed, and there's been a few real important things that have happened in the here over the last year or so. First is sort of Larry Fink. He's the CEO of BlackRock, which is the largest institutional investor in the world, along with Jamie Dimon, who's CEO of Vanguard, and you add into that State Street Global Advisors and Fidelity, and these four companies collectively own, anywhere from 10 to 30% of the average public company, the largest institutional investors in the world. They've been saying for a long time, look, we think ESG is important. We think companies should exist for more than just providing shareholder returns. You have to be a good corporate citizen. You have to focus on other issues than just purely making money at all costs. And they finally put their money where their mouth was and said, look, if you don't adequately report in your environment, social, and governance issues in some sort of regular report, either a sustainability report or in your financials, we're fine either way. We're going to start to actively vote against you and your board of directors. And so far, BlackRock has done that with over 50 companies so far in 2020. They put another 200 on watch that we may vote against you and your board of directors. So when someone who owns 30% of your company says they're going to vote against the board of directors, most companies really have to pay attention there. And this is just an example of some of the issues. So environment, of course, we talked about what those are. Social, diversity and inclusion, employee health and safety, tenant health and safety, making sure people come home safe after work every day, community engagement, and employee wages and benefits. And then on governance, of course, that's more around who's in charge, board diversity, business ethics, compensation, data privacy, and so forth. So that's just sort of setting the stage for what we're going to talk about today, the S in terms of ESG. The next slide here is what are the top 10 of issues affecting real estate, and this came from CRE. I'll let you read all of those, but of course COVID-19 and return to office and how we get back to normal. If we get back to normal, what does that look like? That's affecting all of us, of course. We're looking at debt levels, affordability, and then we get into some other things. How do we fit as many people back in the building? Use our space, technology, infrastructure, and then the bottom of the list, still a top 10, was ESG. Now, pre-COVID, ESG came up a lot higher, but there have been a few things that have been coming up recently that have changed the nature of the ESG conversation that we're going to get into.
So, Rich, given your work across the numerous industries, how do you see these issues stacking up? Do you think do these issues resonate across industries other than real estate?
Well, I think a lot of the public and private indebtedness and affordable housing and flow of people and space, those are unique and germane to corporate real estate. The ESG issues, particularly D&I, diversity and inclusion and equity, they have really specifically focused on gender and racial equity, has really taken top billing. We've had a lot of high profile events here. I think we'll talk about a little bit later that have really put companies on notice that this is an important issue, and lacking any sort of policy response or coordinated response from a federal government level, a lot of companies are really taking the issue into our own hands. And I think we'll talk a little bit about even what some of our employers doing here. And the second part of this, which is related to all of these issues, is a lot of my clients are coming to me saying, look, how do I tell my ESG story my way, in a way that's really authentic and genuine for me, that I understand the issues and that I can report to them, to not only investors, but shareholders, my employees, my clients, my tenants. How can I report on these issues in a way that gets them the information they need and helps show that we're actually creating value in tackling these ESG issues head on, particularly in the social space? Kyle, I'll turn it over to you here.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Rich. Certainly good entry there. So thank you for that. So listen, the commercial real estate sector has a diversity problem. The question is whether this time in history will really lead to change that is really more of a movement as opposed to a moment. And in the wake of George Floyd, many industries have made efforts to improve their diversity, but and real estate's no exception. However, as we all know, in studying the industry, real estate is a lagging indicator. Some of the statistics are quite frightening. For example, only 2% of senior level positions in real estate are held by people of color. And when you look at the percentage of customers, consumers of real estate, occupants, et cetera, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, what's interesting as well is that when you hear about, I've always been the individual when I go to industry events, I'll say, listen, I'm the only one who was a person of color in the room. And so even the most well-run event, from attracting professionals to that, to real estate, it's just really not something that we've seen, sort of improve over time. Certainly, the recent anti-racism protests have put environmental justice in the spotlight. And you can really connect ESG with what's going on in terms of the times that we live in. And so you ask yourself, well, why does diversity in commercial real estate even matter? Uh, as I said, real estate's a lagging indicator. You can look at that in terms of how slow real estate has been to adopt to new technologies. You can also look at today's home sales. I think the month of August had a record number of home sales, in a 14-year cycle. But I don't think anyone would argue that we're in for some tough times in terms of whether or not we're in a recession, entering one, or what have you. And so it's really, really important that organizations commit to really diversifying at all levels. And there's a lot of different ways that companies can demonstrate it. But if you just look at the research, it's projected by the year 2045, less than 50% of the world is going to be people of Caucasian descent. And so now more than ever, within commercial real estate, you really have to serve the needs of every client, particularly those from diverse communities. And the demographics, it's no exception in terms of having to make sure that there's not sort of this one size fits all approach. And so, what we're seeing in terms of even the communities that some of our real estate market participants and clients serve. I know of one instance where the community in which the company operates is roughly, first of all, it's one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the world, with nearly half of the population being people of color. Yet the company itself, when you look at its senior level professionals, 99.9% are are male and 100% are white. So that just doesn't sort of match up with the stakeholders who ultimately are the ones that are going to be the consumers of products. And so, why is racial equality even, a vital part of where we are? The answer is that, as Rich, as you mentioned, BlackRock suggests that, you have to be diverse, but not for a number of reasons, not only for the financial piece of it, but also the non-financial piece. I would tell you that very specifically, companies that are diverse, are going to be the ones that outperform those that are not. And this is not just, again, about financial. It's about innovation. It's about really just kind of bringing things into that next level. And the last thing I would say is that with this pandemic, it's really put an emphasis on Black and Hispanic workers, particularly in low-paid, consumer-facing service jobs where there's a limited ability in terms of being able to work remotely. And so you layer on the fact that jobs are more likely, those types of jobs that they have are more likely to become automated in the future. It's a really frightening and alarming thing. And so, diversity is critically important from a creativity standpoint, innovation, as I mentioned, productivity. All of those will lead to great returns to companies beyond just the increase in revenues.
No, I think you really nailed it there. How important the S is for all of us, particularly diversity. Kyle, I know. I want to talk about dispelling a myth. The Wells Fargo CEO had a public forum with their employees not that long ago, and he made a comment about the perceived or the lack of qualified Black candidates. Basically, says would hire more if there were more qualified candidates, and he got a big backlash from that. Can you talk a little bit about your reaction and experience to some of these sort of long held beliefs?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Rich. I mean, first off, when conducting any kind of search, whether it's at the board level, the C-suite, or even entry level position, the mandate has to make sense. Let's take the board level first. One of my clients told me their search firm signaled that there were no qualified candidates, people of color, to fill an open board seat. And so they filled it with an executive who hadn't previously been on a board, which made me kind of scratch my head. I asked a few questions and later found out that, the mandate was that they needed someone who did not have previous board experience, and they also wanted someone who was diverse. I have literally sitting on my desktop 15 resumes of people through EY's internal board search, a service that we provide to clients and non-clients for free. And I can also, within 1 or 2 phone calls, I could source an equal number of resumes. Usually the mandate a company is looking usually the mandate is they're looking for someone who's diverse and who has past board experience. That can be a challenge if the mandate is too specific, and I call that kind of a purple unicorn. Someone who's been on a board before, is a current or past CFO, because they check the box in terms of being a financial expert, has specific real estate experience, and say, for example, in the home building space. And I literally had that search mandate. In my opinion, home building is simply moving inventory. And so if you can get someone with experience working in retail and consumer products just as easily, someone who understands the voice of the customer, that, in my opinion, would be certainly, a qualified person to consider for a board position. At the C-suite level, it could be harder, but it's not impossible. And I could give a number of examples, where you could find someone in public accounting, someone out of investment banking. But I want to jump to how EY approaches recruiting. We've said very publicly that we're committed to diversity and inclusion, and it starts with the on-campus experience. We recruit at many of the historically Black colleges and universities. We attend and sponsor local events such as the National Association of Black Accountants and the Association of Latino Professionals for America, just to name 2. Membership is also encouraged for our current EY professionals. For example, I'm a board member of the Real Estate Executive Council, a trade association of minority executives doing business in commercial real estate. Our chairwoman is a lead independent director of a publicly traded REIT, and several of our members are on publicly traded boards, including CBRE, Cantor Fitzgerald, and Ares Commercial Real Estate Corporation, just to name a few. And those are just examples within commercial real estate. To the question, companies that handle the issue well are those that look beyond their immediate network of friends, college roommates, and fellow board members, and really sort of cast a wider net and just say, rather than just saying, I don't know anyone, and so a person with that skill set doesn't exist. There are also executive search firms, trade associations, like I mentioned before, like Real Estate Executive Council, also ELC, the Executive Leadership Council, that specialize in sourcing talented, diverse candidates at the C-suite and the board level.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I think I wanted to pick up one thing on reporting, right, in this topic. And for any publicly traded companies or people who work for publicly traded companies out there, or go to the capital markets for money, so to listen up, because this applies to you. So State Street, and again, one of the top 5 institutional investors, they just in August, so last month, actually a month ago tomorrow, they issued guidance for companies for reporting on diversity. So they actually had sort of a five-step guidance. So they said, we want you to report on what's your strategy. So, that's just like anything, right? You have to have a strategy. What is our strategy? What role does diversity play in the firm's broader human management practices? And what's your long-term strategy to have a company that looks more like society writ large, and the client, the company, the stakeholders you serve? Then what goals? What specific goals are you going to set that support achievement of that overall strategy? Then against those goals, of course, you're going to have metrics. You're going to have to talk about the measures of diversity, the global employee base, by age, gender, ethnic, representation, LGBTQ, and so forth. Not only of the employee base, but the board as well. And there have been numerous studies, as Kyle had alluded to, that boards that have more female members perform better. Boards that are more diverse, their companies perform better. There's a diversity of thought and think and action there that really benefits them. So in the last 2 around board oversight around D&I, and then how does the board support racial and ethnic representation at the board level? So here we have one of the largest institutional investors in the world saying to companies, not sometime in the future, not that this is important, but next year, 2021, we want you to report on this in these 5 ways. So very prescriptive. It's not something pie in the sky, ESG is important or D&I is important. It's important to everyone. This is very, very clear. And for those of you who are in the ESG space and you're doing your ESG report, or you're reporting to GRESB, you're writing your own sustainability report, responding to Carbon Disclosure Project, I'm an ESG professional. That's my job. I do this day in, day out. And I used to be a chief sustainability officer before I came to EY. Mark my words, these will be part of most of the reporting frameworks going forward. SASB, the Global Reporting Initiative, TCFD, or even the new WEF, the World Economic Forum strategy. So I can see this happening, over time. Kyle, I think this one was still you.
Great, thanks. So, I touched upon it, in some of my earlier comments, but certainly with COVID-19 and the racial protests, et cetera, it's really going to be incumbent upon all consumers of real estate, all market participants, whether you're an asset owner, an investor, a tenant, an occupant. It really is critically important that we place emphasis on the social aspects of real estate and what that means, especially, those of you who may have heard in terms of the digital divide, which is essentially focusing on the fact that, disproportionately fewer people of color have access to things like Wi-Fi. And in this time when we're all working remotely, it's really, it really becomes more of an issue because if you don't have computer access, then you're falling behind as an individual. The other thing as well is COVID-19 has really become sort of a current day form of redlining, where not everyone has equal access to all that is out there to consume in terms of real estate. But what I would tell you is that this is certainly a time. This is a moment where folks should really sort of think about the social aspects. With whether it's from an education standpoint, health, safety, and wellness. All of the things that really feed into the resiliency of commercial real estate, because we all spend our time, the statistics, 90% of our time is spent indoors. You're going from your home to your office building, to places like, if you have an elderly parent who's in senior housing. And so all of these things are incredibly important. And so again, as you think about the demographics of the communities in which you operate as a real estate market participant, it really is critically important that we think about the S and ESG, because that's really what's going to create that resiliency within our sector.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just before you sort of close us out on the last slide, and then have a few minutes for Q&A. There's a chat box on the side. Feel free to throw a few questions in there. We can try to get to them. I don't know when they're going to give us the yank here. But for this slide, it's the value of an integrated ESG strategy. So to me, and again, I don't like reading slides to people. Presumably, if you could log on to this platform, you could read this slide. To me, the takeaway is sustainability in the past is one of the things that we kind of knew was important, but now over time, we're more and more able to quantify its importance. We're seeing concrete things. We're seeing value retention, 7% increase in asset value over traditional buildings. We're seeing market differentiation and market performance, with companies on average, performing up to 6% better, companies with high ESG scores, than companies that don't take ESG seriously. But now, how do you apply that same sort of quantification to the D&I, the diversity and social piece? Look, we've seen studies, diversity drives profitability. We've seen that at the corporate board level. There's some footnotes down here you can take a look at, and we know that it basically we know that there's non-financial metrics as well. So like Kyle had said, that the whole not enough qualified candidates has essentially become an old wives' tale, right? And that companies that fail to take action on strengthening, their commitment to diversity, on transparently reporting those issues, they're going to face market pushback, decline in reputational value, and difficulty in recruiting new candidates. Look, for better or worse, millennials and younger folks, at the average age at EY is something like 25, 26 years old. So we recruit and hire thousands of people a year to assist for audit and our consulting and advisory practices. We want the best and the brightest. And this is an important issue that we're going to have to address, and we are addressing, as Kyle had said, a couple of things that we're making such commitments to, that we really need to take this seriously. And the final piece I'll just mention is that 40 years ago, the average company's market capitalization was made up mostly of property, plant, and equipment, and things like goodwill and intangible assets were about 20% or so. Now that is really switched. I mean, goodwill, reputation, things like that, that is just such an outsized part of many companies' market capitalization. We look at Apple Computer as just an example. They don't own any buildings. They own one, their headquarters building. They don't own factories. They don't own trucks. They don't own their stores. They don't move product around. They don't make their own product. Yet, aside from the big hunk of cash they have, their market capitalization is all on their brand name. So for a lot of the companies who are here today, you've got brand names that could easily be damaged with the increased focus on disclosing on the S piece. GRESB's really, really good at saying down to the kilowatt hour, how many, what's this chiller versus that chiller. That's all important for your investors. But in terms of the social piece, that's a real growing issue. And I know the Steers Center at Georgetown is looking at educating next generation of leaders with ESG, grounded in ESG. So that's somewhere you can take a look at there. So with that, Kyle, thanks very much for taking the time for this. Really great working with you on here and our shared clients. And I'll look over at the chat screen, see if there's any questions here. Well, there's just one that I had already responded to from Kyra in terms of how do you define and measure sustainable social goals. The first is you need a strategy. What is it you're trying to achieve? Then once you get that strategy, and say what it is you're trying to achieve, you set some criteria. Just something as germane as defining what constitutes a full-time employee. That's really that's important as well. And then you get down to your specific criteria and metrics, and then you can report on those metrics in a meaningful way. And you just did a follow-up around well-being. Generally, that's with employee surveys. Asking them to do a regular check-in, not once a year, but bi-weekly. Sort of an "Are you okay?" kind of thing. Kyle, I think I've wrapped up here. Would you like to sort of close us out with a few parting closing thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Wanted to thank everyone for listening and for your engagement. As Rich said, it's a really important topic. Now's the time. I think that the E in terms of ESG, I think we all understand what we need to do in terms of making sure that our carbon footprint and things around environmental are really sort of front and center, whether it's indoor air quality, lighting, et cetera. Now is really the time, as I said earlier, is that with the increasing diversification of the world, now is really the time for all of us to lean in and really figure out ways and strategies to make all of society, but specifically for real estate here, make it more inclusive. And so looking forward to continuing to engage with you all as well as other market participants on this topic. And if you guys have any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask either Rich or I in the chat room, feel free to message us directly.
This is great. I really appreciate working with you on this, Kyle. Thank you all. We have 30 or so people. Thank you for this support, folks, from Hop In here. And with that, I think we'll turn you over to lunchtime. And my email is rich.good, GOODE, at ey.com. Kyle, I think you're just kyle.bolden at ey.com. Any questions, feel free to send it to us. Thank you all. It's great to be here. Thanks again, Kyle.
Thanks.